Alright, welcome. So this video is going to be how to do the inner work on semen retention. So we're just going to be specifically covering and talking about the internal processes that go on within sexual transmutation and semen retention and how that will affect your journey, how important it is, as well as how to do it, how to learn how to do it, and what to look for, right? Because there are certain signs that you are progressing and there are certain signs that you are regressing, and so we're going to be able to cover all of those in this video. Before we begin though, I would like to announce that I am currently building out my Academy of Self-Mastery, which will be a community of people who are dedicated to self-improvement, who are dedicated to bettering themselves and achieving their goals. And I will be providing in-depth and in-detail courses on all of the topics regarding self-improvement, all of the different areas of self-improvement, including routine, dopamine detoxing, mental health, fitness, diet, and sexual transmutation, and much, much more. We will also be doing group calls. We'll be doing weekly calls within that community, and you'll be able to work with me directly in order to implement some of this stuff. So if that's something you guys are interested in, you can go ahead and click the first link in my description, which will bring you to my Instagram. And you can just send me a quick DM over on Instagram and request early access to the program. All you have to do is say, hey man, I'm looking to get into the program early access, looking to get into the Academy of Self-Mastery early access, and I will get you sorted from there. But without further ado, let's get into the actual content. So when I started semen retention, I knew that the inner work was important. I knew that you had to be willing to change and transform in order to be successful, but there were certain things that I wasn't willing to give with yet, right? There were certain things that I wasn't quite willing to give up yet. There were certain things that I wasn't quite ready to give with, but I knew that I had to. And so when I started semen retention, I did well for a while, right? I was consistent. I built up the energy. I learned how to circulate it. I learned how to transmute it. I learned how to direct it and use it to manifest things in my life. And I saw all of the benefits come into fruition. I saw everything that I had thought was the reason I wanted to do this practice actually come into fruition, and I actually experienced all of that. But then at a certain point in my journey, it almost seemed like I was blocked, right? Like I was unable to experience any of that anymore. And it almost felt like the longer I went through this period of time, the further away I actually got from where I was before and what I was actually going for, what I was trying to achieve at that time. And what I realized was there were certain things that I wasn't willing to give, but because I wasn't willing to give with them and change and transform to be in more of alignment with my higher self, which is what this energy is pushing you and almost forcing you to do when you transmute it, the only other option than growth and evolution is to release this energy, right? Is to actually ejaculate the semen so that you no longer feel the drive, right? That force behind your need to grow. That drive is derived from the sexual energy. And so when we drain it, we no longer feel that drive, and so we're no longer having to fight and struggle with this need to change and transform and evolve, right? But the problem is that when we release the energy and we don't change and we don't evolve, we become stagnant and we become stuck. For those on semen retention, those doing this practice, if we aren't willing to give with those things, if we aren't willing to change, if we try to retain and transmute the energy, but we are not willing to transform ourselves and change ourselves, we will struggle a lot. And that is what I started to experience, was I was essentially struggling because I was being revealed on a, more amplified basis, the things that I wasn't willing to give with. Meaning, the things that I wasn't willing to give up were amplified and blasted in front of my face, and that forced me to change them. That forced me to fix them, right? And that is the power of semen retention, is it can force you to go through these transformations. It can force you to go through these changes, but you have to be willing to do it, right? It takes work and it takes effort. And so when you're practicing semen retention, you have to expect this to be a full spectrum journey, right? It's not just semen retention, right? It is semen retention and self-improvement and working towards your goals and self-transformation and learning to be growth-oriented, right? Learning to align yourself with your highest aspirations. And for those of us on this path, we have an advantage because we no longer need the same kind of vices or relaxation or rest periods that normal people might, right? We still obviously are human beings, but our energy works differently. And because we have more of it and in more abundance and it's more potent, we don't feel drained to a point that we need to turn to vices when this happens. And so what this means is we can live a 100% self-improvement based lifestyle, and we should be living that self-improvement, evolution-based, growth-based lifestyle. But the problem is, if we're fighting against that, if we're fighting against that change, and we're not allowing ourselves to be in 100% focus and 100% on the right path, well, what'll happen is that, like I said, what happened with me, it'll be blasted in front of your face, and it'll be presented to you in such a way that it is going to force you to break through, and it's going to force you to evolve, and it's going to force you to actually overcome that thing, right? And this is where the inner work comes in, because we need to work through the internal processes. We need to be dissolving and destroying the egos, right? We need to be forming a more developed consciousness, right? We need to be collecting our energy back into a stable place, right? Our egos, our psychological tendencies, in Christianity, they're called demons. But these psychological personalities, these egos, right? These demons taking our energy from us, stripping us of our energy, are just creations of our own mind. And they are essentially, you can think of them as consciousness traps, right? They basically hold and contain consciousness, right? And so when we say somebody's unconscious, we mean this person is following a programming, right? They aren't consciously making their decisions. There's a programming making those decisions for them. That programming is one of many egos within that person's psyche, right? Or the personality that is associated with that programming or that flow is one of the egos within that person's psyche. And so when we talk about somebody who's conscious, this is somebody who has stripped the ego of the consciousness that it needs for fuel, and so the ego has died, and the consciousness, or you, the being, is left with just a little bit more fullness, a little bit more of yourself. You're a little bit more centered and present and grounded. And this is the process that we're looking to achieve. Each ego, or each problem that we're faced with, each flaw of ours that we're faced with, is a call to action, essentially, to work through that problem, work through that ego, dissolve and destroy it and break it down, and then transform it into something else, transform it into something better. And so what I did was I realized I had to directly work through the things that I was not willing to give with. And by doing so, I've been able to get back into that state that I was in before. Some of the benefits were taken away, and I was brought off my path, right? But only to help me see this thing that was stopping me from moving with full intention on my path. And so by working through that thing and essentially cutting that anchor off, right? That was a weight that was tying me down. By having to just work with the weight instead of focusing on trying to trudge forward, well, now I can move forward a lot faster, a lot easier, with more effectiveness, more efficiency, right? I feel a lot lighter now moving into the next things because I've worked through those blockages that I had. But when those blockages come up, it's going to feel like this period of darkness. It's going to feel like this intensity. It's going to feel like everything is falling apart. But in reality, that is everything breaking down, everything current breaking down, the psychological programmings within you, everything around you is starting to dissolve and break down so that it can be reconstructed, repurposed, reformed. And so when we create a change, it starts with the destruction of the old self to create room for the new self to then be developed within. And so that's what this is it's showing us the part of ourself that needs to be destroyed, and it's putting us through this process, which is a painful process as we're still identified with these egos. And so by learning how to not identify, learning how to assist the process by staying within our consciousness, within awareness, we can make a lot more progress on this journey, and we can do it with a lot more intensity, right? We can evolve faster, and we can evolve to greater levels than we could before, right? And so the first section of this video is why the inner work is so important. All right, so we're just going to quickly talk about why it's so important. The first thing is that it's when you master the mind you master everything within your reality, within yourself, right? So the mind, if you can learn to master your mind, right? If you can learn to break down these psychological tendencies, these egos, which are blocking you from fully expressing yourself on your highest expression, whatever that may be. If you can start to learn how to dissolve these egos and return them back to a state of consciousness, return yourself back to a state of fullness of yourself, not, a divide between you and this ego and that other ego, right? There's only one strong identity and personality within your psyche, and that's you. That's the goal. That's what we'd like to achieve. But the process of doing so is by working with our current psychological tendencies, learning to work with our mind, learning to work with these egos, identify these egos and not necessarily work with them, but work on destroying them and repurposing them, reintegrating them. You can think of the egos as a personality that has been twisted or perverted, right? So if you think of like the personality of anger, right? If you feel anger as yourself, as your consciousness, right? It's an energy driving change. But what an ego might do in that case is take that psychological tendency, the reaction to anger, to then change the situation. It might take that and it would pervert it into need to react for defense of the self, right? You may need to react with anger and express anger and be aggressive instead of learning to work with your anger to create a change. That would be the consciousness. Ego would want to defend itself, right? Ego would want to create problems. Ego would want to react to that anger with that anger, right? And so an ego would be just a perverted personality trait. And so what you're doing is you're working with these egos to return them back to their original state, which is just as part of the whole, as part of the self, as part of you, right? And so that's why we dissolve and destroy them, because then what is returned back to us when we do that is consciousness, and that consciousness is what we are, right? So we become more full. The next thing is overcoming lust, and I mean truly overcoming lust, right? Overcoming lust doesn't look like just not watching porn anymore or not sleeping around anymore. Overcoming lust truly means that on an internal basis, your sexual energy isn't obsessed with physical gratification, meaning you don't have this feeling that you need to release your energy. You don't feel this feeling that you need to indulge sexually. You don't feel this feeling that you need physical pleasure to be satisfied, to be content. And it is an internal process, right? It is an internal process of actually working directly with our sexual energy instead of repressing that energy. When we repress that energy, it only develops more into lust. It only perverts itself more. It only becomes more corroded, more destructive, right? But because of the repression of it, we don't notice this until it releases itself. And that's what we feel as these emotional outbursts, or like this lust that we need to indulge sexually and release sexually. That's why most people like sex is this thing that's full of aggression and like passion and in some cases like pain is considered pleasurable inside of sex. But really that's just a perversion of the sexual energy that's a result of the suppression of it. But to work directly with the sexual energy and convert it from a state of density and lust over to its natural state, which is as a creative force. It's meant to be a creative force, a creative energy that you utilize in order to build whatever it is you're looking to build. Everything you're doing on self-improvement is fueled by the sexual energy. And so when you have little of it, it's very difficult to make big changes in your life. It's very difficult to do the work. It's very difficult to progress and be productive and be focused. So you need to use the sexual energy for its purpose, which is to drive you towards evolution and drive you towards creation of something, developing something. And that something is not supposed to be a baby, and it's not supposed to be lust or darkness or evil energy, negative energy. It's supposed to be that purpose that you have in your mind. And so by working within the mind to remove the lust, remove your thoughts about sex, remove your thoughts about physical gratification, and focus your thoughts onto the goal, onto the purpose, onto the thing that you know is what you're here to achieve, and then mixing that with the sexual energy, using the sexual energy with that mental vision, that can create the thing in reality. But the problem is most people's minds are focused on lust, are focused on physical gratification, are focused on instant pleasure. And so that's where their energy is directed towards. So the next thing is internal transmutations. So one of the key aspects of this process, killing ego, is the transmutation of it. So internal transmutations mean that there are 10 spots. There are points in your body, energy nodes, that are dense, that are stuck, that are closed off. And the energy in there is stuck, dense, and it's become repressed in that area. And so one form of utilizing the internal transmutations is converting that state from a dense energy to releasing that energy and allowing it to flow freely again. Breaking and releasing that blockage. And that happens through conversion or transmutation of the energy within it. Same thing with the sexual energy. Every time you feel lust, you can transmute that energy within yourself from lust to a creative force, something that is going to drive you towards action, but a positive form of action, right? It's just about where you are in your mind and your ability to become aware and conscious within yourself, within your vessel, and control and influence the different aspects of that. And another example of the internal transmutations is the egos. When we have a psychological ego that we can see, when we have lust in our mind, let's say, if there's lust in your mind and it's this strong ego that you have, you can apply the same process to converting that ego back into consciousness, right? That's another form of the internal transmutation. And so all of these things put together, right, is what makes semen retention so powerful. Right, is mastery over your mind, which gives you mastery over your vessel. Full control of the mind again, and not having to share it with all of these egos and these different personalities trying to pull you in other directions so that you can focus on one. And then overcoming lust and converting that sexual energy into a creative force. And that way we can utilize it. And then going through the process of internal transmutations and learning how to convert certain tendencies, certain energies, stuck points, tense points in our bodies, and free that energy or convert it into, back into consciousness if we're talking about the egos, whatever. Or convert the sexual energy from its lust, its state of lust, its dense state, to its free-flowing creative state, right? All of these things are why the inner work is the key to semen retention and sexual transmutation, because with these things, we essentially become masters of our vessels. We become masters of our energy. And so people think semen retention is so that, more women will look at you, or you can get more success faster, which both are true. But the actual importance of semen retention, and the reason I talk about it, is because it is essentially the key to, I've said this in other videos, and I've called other things the master key, but it truly is the master key to progress. It is the ideal foundation for any type of self-improvement journey or any type of goal achievement, because it creates the perfect individual for this journey, for this process of evolution and transformation, right? And so it's a very powerful practice if you know how to do it. But most people only go as far as explaining, you get more women. And so, if you can stop jerking off, you can fuck a lot. But that keeps people in a state of lust, right? That keeps people thinking in lust. They don't understand that there's a process of internal transmutation. There's a process of change that has to happen in order for that to be sustainable. You can't retain the semen if your mind is still in lust. It's impossible, right? It absolutely cannot and will not happen. You can only force your body for so long, and that's why most people still think streaks are the way to go. Streaks aren't a thing. If you're still doing streaks, what that means is you're not really on semen retention. What that means is you're on and off, right? People like to say, just because you broke your streak once doesn't mean that you actually fell off, but in reality, every time you ejaculate, it is going to deplete your energy. It is going to solidify lust in your body. And so every time you fail is going to be a step in the wrong direction. And so if you're kind of in this back and forth state still, It's because you haven't gotten the fact that it's not about holding the sexual energy in, it's about transmuting it. And the reason we hold it in is to transmute it, is to convert it, and then utilize it. So the process of inner alchemy, I'm going to teach you the exact process for this. The first thing that I have here is transmuting thought into action, right? So alchemy is essentially conversion from one state of energy to another, right? And so one way to look at this is transmuting a thought, an idea, into an action that can manifest that idea physically, right? And so that is a form of transmutation. You're taking one form of energy, which is thought, mind energy, mental energy, and you're converting it by processing it through the body into action. And through the action, you're solidifying it into a certain result or a certain thing that you're creating in reality, right? So perfect example of this is I had the thought to create this video, right? And then I converted that thought into the action that created the script. And then again, I had the thought to record the video today, right? And so that was converted into the action of creating the video. And then what is left over, what is solidified by that, so it went from one state of energy, which is a thought in my mind, to a new state of energy, which is solidified in the physical world, which is the video that I'm creating, the video that will come out as a result of this, right? And so you can do this with pretty much anything, right? And you do this with sexual gratification as well. Every time you think lust, you are converting your sexual energy and your mental energy into a state of lust, and then you are converting that into the action of enacting that desire. And what that does is it solidifies a different type of reality. It solidifies a sexual obsession. It solidifies a lustful mind and a lustful state, instead of solidifying some form of positive creation in the world, right? The next thing is transmuting emotional states. So we can take our emotions and we can transmute them the same way. We can convert them into an understanding of the experience, and we can convert that into an action based on that experience to either change the situation or put ourselves in a better situation, right? Or to accept a situation. Whatever it may be, there's some form of action that needs to be taken in order to move forward, and that is what the emotion is driving. It's just that most people get so engulfed into the emotion itself that they can't take it any further than that first step, right? There's 3 steps to the process. Most people stop at the first one because they become so obsessed with the emotion itself, right? Next thing is dissolving egos. Essentially what I was talking about before, but we need to become aware of these egos. And by focusing on them with our consciousness, by putting our consciousness onto these egos, we can siphon our energy back off of them, right? You think about essentially pressing into it, and what happens as a result is your consciousness absorbs it, right? So the more it presses into that ego, the more it absorbs that ego's energy and can dissolve it. But the other can be true. If you are stuck in the ego and you're thinking from the ego can then press into the consciousness and your awareness and dissolve that instead. And so what we need to do is learn how to dissolve the egos, break them down, and just be grounded in ourselves, be grounded in our one being, right? Like being one, being whole, being focused on one direction, right? The next thing is transforming the self from the inside out, right? So we don't necessarily actually go through self-transformation by doing the self-improvement habits or by starting the business. We go through self-transformation internally, right? So transformation of the self happens internally, it happens psychologically, it happens energetically. And it happens physically as well, but in the form of actions, not creating something, right? So what do I mean by this? I mean that to transform yourself truly, just taking the actions won't work. Just thinking in alignment won't work. Just energetically being in alignment doesn't work. But all 3, if sustained, will create a positive and permanent change, right? So if you can, in your mind, convert your thoughts from one state to the next, convert your energy from one state to the next, and then convert your actions from one state to the next, well, now you will be fully embodied in this new state, right? So, for example, if you have an addiction to porn, what you can do is you have to change within your mind first, right? Your energy, you'll still feel the lust physically and energetically, right? You will still want the thing energetically. You'll still feel the sexual energy when it comes on. You'll still want to release that energy. It'll feel like a burden. It'll feel like you're carrying weight. But just hold on a bit, right? The physical energy, the physical desire, the physical urge, you will feel it, but just hold on. In your mind, just convert the lust. Transform the lust. Transform the state of your thoughts from one to the next, right? From lust to some form of growth, some form of productivity, something that you can create, something that you can build, right? And if you put your thoughts and fixate your thoughts onto that, and just focus your thoughts there, don't worry about anything else. Just focus your thoughts on that thing. And then your energy will start to move in that way. You will start to feel your energy change, and you can consciously now work with your energy and just convert your energy to align with that now. And then once you have both of those things, now just get up and take action on something that is in alignment with that. And if you do that consistently over a long period of time, you will completely transform into this new person that you're trying to become, this new self. Because you are consistently conditioning yourself to react to the same energy differently. And this is one of the keys of alchemy. This is the purpose of alchemy, right? Is taking what is ourselves, taking the energy that we currently have, which is just as valuable, or it has all the same material and contains all the same kind of energy as gold, but it's lead, right? Lead to gold, that whole idea of alchemy. But if our energy is in a state of lead, right? It's all the same energy, all the same amount, but currently it's in this state. It's like lead, right? And we're taking that, converting into gold. We as humans start with all of the energy we would need to create gold, but it starts off as lead. And we, as the human being, our jobs here is to convert it, is to learn how to convert and transform that energy through our lives, through our lifespan, through what we create and leave as a legacy, through the businesses we create, through our self-improvement, and all of that, and convert it into gold, right? Taking what energy was a waste, was dark, negative, and turning it into something that can create a positive change for yourself and even somebody else. So the last thing I have here are the practices, right? So this is actually what you can do in order to work on what we've been talking about in this entire video. So the first thing is self-observation, right? Just observe yourself. And this doesn't mean just like watch yourself physically, but also internally, right? Watch what you do, but also watch what you think and when you're thinking that and why you're thinking that. Watch how you feel, when you feel and why you feel it, and what you do in response to that feeling. And if you can get really, really good at this process of self-observation, just looking and observing, you can learn a lot of your different tendencies, your psychological tendencies, your different desires, everything. And you can learn to understand it in a way that can allow you then to change it. But without that first step of self-observation, you wouldn't be able to change it in the same way. So the next thing is conscious dissolution of energy, emotions, thoughts, and actions. So this is like what we were talking about before with dissolving the ego, but we can do this with anything. We can do this with actions. So if we have this action that we feel we need to take, you can dissolve that action as well, which is really a thought, but it's a thought driving an action, and you can stop it at the point of being a thought, right? And you can dissolve it just by becoming aware of it. And let's say you're in the middle of an action. Let's say, I decided to make a mistake today, and, I go and I smoke some weed or something, right? I'm rolling up and I'm halfway through it, and then I get a realization of like, what am I doing here? You know what I mean? Why am I doing this? And in that moment, to break out of that, what you can do is dissolve the action through just becoming deeply aware of it. If you just become completely conscious and aware and sink your awareness into what you're doing right now, from there you can then start to dissolve it. But if you're thinking over it, if you're stressing it, if you're like, but I wanted to do it, but I want to get better, and this, that, and the third, and you go back and forth and you fight it, well, then you just create this conflict. And then you're not focusing, you're not present. But if you just ground yourself in the present moment and you just bring your awareness to the thing that you're doing and why you might not want to be doing it, and like try to just understand what is actually happening and playing out right now, you can dissolve the action as well. And you can dissolve the thoughts. that are driving the actions. If you become aware, I have this desire to do this thing, but just by becoming aware of why you have that desire and placing your awareness there and holding it there, you can start to dissolve that thought down and break it down into just raw consciousness again. And then you can either convert it, create a new thought, or you can just move on, right? Either or. Next thing is inner alignment. So similar to the transforming the self from the inside out section, where we talk about, having all the different aspects, mental, physical, energetic. We need to create internal alignment, right? And so we need to align our energy and our mind and our psychological tendencies, our thoughts, you could say our psychological wiring, right? Everything needs to be wired to be in alignment with what we're looking to achieve. And so what we do is we can take a misaligned portion. Let's say it's our lust, right? Because that's the point of this video. Let's say it's our lust. Our lust is misaligned with the goals that we have. What we can do is we can take that lust and we can convert it through the transmutation process, through what I was talking about, dissolving the lust. We can convert it to something that is in alignment with what we're looking to do. So every time we see this disruption inside of our bodies, or we see this wall that we hit in real life, both of these things are signs of the same thing, right? They're signs that you have some form of flaw or some form of misalignment. And so what you need to work through is that, right? You need to find a way to realign yourself. And then the last thing is sublimation of the sexual energy and emotional state. So sublimation of the sexual energy essentially means converting it into a more subtle state. And then what it'll do is it'll start to rise up the spinal column through the chakra system. And so what we're doing here is we're essentially converting sexual energy from its dense state, which is in lust, over to its more abundant state, which is, bliss, creativity, and joy and evolution. So the process of sublimation means taking the sexual energy, utilizing sexual transmutation practices, and allowing it to be raised up the spine, allowing it to raise in frequency and vibration as you progress and as you get better, right? And you can do the same thing with your emotional states. You can raise the frequency of your emotional states. Anger doesn't have to be such a negative state, a negative emotion. It can drive positive change if you can raise the frequency of it, right? So all of this is to say that you want to learn how to work with your energy and raise the frequency of it instead of seeing something like the sexual energy as bad and just trying to repress it and not feel it and not worry about it, right? But that is all I have for you guys in this video. Hope you guys enjoyed. I hope it was helpful. If it was, go ahead and leave a like. And if you want to see any more content like this, go ahead and subscribe. Anybody who is interested in the Academy of Self-Mastery, you can go ahead and send me a DM on Instagram, and I will respond as quick as possible, get you all sorted. And also, for any of you guys who do request early access, you will get early access to the courses as well, right? So you won't even have to pay me until the program's live. But if you request the early access, I will give you access to the courses for free. And yeah, that is all I have for this video, though. So I'm out of here. Peace.